Hi, I'm Austin Atwell, and this is my presentation for HCA 420A on evaluating performance and creating improvements. Creating improvements through evaluations. Analyzing data can be used to evaluate performance. An example of this is to create a graph that shows the number of patients that are seen on different days of the week. Improvements can be created from this information. An example is using the graph that shows the number of patients on different days of the week and use it to create an efficient staffing chart so you have the right number of staff for each day. By analyzing data and using it correctly, health outcomes can be improved. Using data analytics techniques to evaluate performance. In a healthcare organization, a lot of data is collected. The data comes from patient surveys, electronic medical record systems, human resources reports, and many other sources. A manager must be able to identify the type of the data so that it can be used appropriately. There are two main types of data: interval and categorical data. Interval data is quantitative and usually uses arithmetic. It can be split into continuous and discrete data. Continuous data is numeric and can be broken into smaller subunits. An example is age. A patient's age can be 20 years old. It can also be 20 years and 98 days old. It can also be 20 years, 98 days, and 11 hours old. Changes depending on the level of precision needed. Discrete data is also numeric but cannot be changed to different values depending on precision. An example is the number of staff needed on each day. If you need 12 and a half nurses on Wednesday, then that is how many are needed. There is no further precision allowed on that. Categorical data. Categorical data is qualitative data. It is used to collect data on observations. Categorical data is split into nominal and ordinal data. Nominal data is used to record values that have no rank or value. Gender is an example of nominal data because it's important information that is not ranked. Ordinal data is used to record values that can be ranked. Values like patient satisfaction that can be ranked 1 to 10 are ordinal data. So how do we use this data? Once a manager has decided on the correct data type to evaluate performance, then they must use the data correctly. If a manager wants to evaluate how the nursing staff are treating patients, then the best type of data to collect is ordinal data with a survey. Then it is important to use the correct method to display this data. It's important to display data in a way that will show where changes need to be made. An example is adding every question on a survey to the same graph so you can see the difference between the answers given by patients and find any disparities between the different parts of the survey. Designing and implementing improvements. Systematic critical thinking must be used to design improvements. Once improvements have been designed, they must be implemented correctly so that improvements can be made. Systematic critical thinking. Three common models in the healthcare field that help facilitate critical thinking are plan, do, check, act, Six Sigma methodology, and lean strategy. PDCA can be used to find a problem and work towards fixing it. An example is realizing patient satisfaction is down, so you plan to fix it. You have a small number of staff implement these changes that hope to fix the patient satisfaction. You check the data and decide if there's been an increase to patient satisfaction, and then you implement those changes to the entire organization to increase patient satisfaction over the entire organization. Six Sigma methodology is based on define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. An example is defining the problem with the system, measuring how the problem affects the system, analyzing the collected data, and then using it to improve the system. And then finally, control and sustain the new process so that the improvements can stick to the entire system. And then lean strategies, they focus on one process and they work to improve it. Six Sigma and lean strategies can be used in tandem to increase the use of these strategies. So, implementing improvements. Unintended consequences are the first thing to look for after improvements have been made. An unintended consequence of changing how staff interacts with patients to improve satisfaction surveys is the change in satisfaction of long-time patients who do not like these changes. Finding unintended consequences is important so that new changes can be made to create even more improvements in the future. Small wins are also important and can improve the organization over time. An example of that is improved silverware can lead to happier kitchen staff, which leads to better food quality, which leads to happier nurses, which leads to increased satisfaction surveys. So you've got to look at those small wins and work with them over time to see what you can do with those as well. It's also important to know what your end goal is, and you have to have a plan to reach that goal so that you know what you want from your improvements. Biblical worldview. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. Hebrews 10:24. As Christians, it is important to always be completing God's works. Working towards improvement is working towards being the best in God's eyes. Conclusion. It's important to evaluate performance through analytics so that improvements can be made within an organization. An organization must always strive to improve itself, or else it will start to slowly decay over time. These are my resources, and thank you very much.